Hey everybody, we're the Menschwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
As I said to you earlier, it's another day on God's ever winter greening earth. I don't know if you've been. I've been enjoying the great weather. I think today in Toronto it was approximately 25 degrees outside
Oh yeah,
in early February, but a great sign that the sun is shining on National Girls and Women in Sports Week.
yeah, that's right.
Which brings us here to the theme of our episode today.
Yeah, we have a really good interview coming up with Chelsey Goldberg. I should say, I have an interview coming up. Gabe had technical difficulties, unfortunately, so it was just me. I would say the less hockey knowledgeable of our co-hosts.
It's okay. Most of my questions, I mean, in addition to all of her accomplishments and her spot in the Jews in Sports Hall of Fame, the Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, her work with the Los Angeles Kings, Maccabi hockey, all of those incredible things. I was also planning on asking her about any of the Goldbergs that I know in Los Angeles.
Yeah, always a good opportunity to play Jewish geography when we have a guest on.
Exactly.
With one of the big Jewish last names, I guess.
Probably the best. What is the town she is living in now? Did we determine if she's the only Jew in that town?
I did ask her about that. It is. I'm not going to try the pronunciation, but she does say it. It is in rural Sweden, near where Sweden meets up with Finland, up at the Arctic Circle. So, it's pretty far north. She thought she was probably the only Jew in town, but she seems to have a great time out there and. Doing some great work. So very excited for that interview with her. As you mentioned, Gabe, it is National Girls and Women in Sports Day on February 7th, which should be when this is coming out, hopefully when you're listening to it as well. And we want to have a great female Jewish athlete on to talk about it. So, Chelsea's been really important in starting the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association and also in getting ice hockey for women in Maccabiah Games, which is something we've talked about in the last couple of years.
We've had, members of the gold medal winning Canadian team on this podcast,
yeah.
and happy to have members of the American team as well. And a lot of we've had some Jewish women hockey players, which we are thrilled to have at any time, and we'll continue to do so. Speaking of National Girls and Women in Sports Day, digging a little into the history of the day, I think we might have our first female Mike Jacobs All-Star.
Oh yeah, who's that?
At least first in a long time. So the day was created in memory of Olympic volleyball player Flo Hyman.
Wow.
Actually, Flora Hyman, who really sounds like, so-and-so's booby. But instead, no, she is not. She is from Los Angeles as well. She's a professional volleyball player who tragically died at age 31 while, playing professionally in Japan. And sort of to remember her as an Olympic hero, and sort of a tireless advocate for national girls and women's in sports. Her death was, I would say, memorialized into a day to uplift all women in professional sports. And I think we're seeing a lot of that this last year, especially. We're seeing a lot of attention in Canada paid to the PWHL. There's a game in Toronto next week that sold out 18,000 seats. Which is pretty exciting between Toronto and Montreal. Toronto and Ottawa, I think, are playing in Pittsburgh the following week. So the league is definitely trying to take advantage of the marketing wins that they've had now.
Okay.
And we obviously support that.
Yeah. So for Flo Hyman, not Jewish, but Mike Jacobs All-Star sounds like she could be. I guess one that we'd be happy to have had, but it's an ongoing struggle for women's sports, I think, in various ways, and for Jewish women as well. And I got into that a little bit with Chelsey. Before we get to the interview, I just want to, we just had an episode last week, so just want to touch on a few things going on. The last episode we did was about the NHL All-Star Game being a particularly Jewish All-Star Game. There was a bit of an incident. I don't know exactly how to describe it. The story is basically that the woman who sang the American national anthem did so in a, I guess, keffiyeh-inspired sweatshirt. I would say it looks more like a Bear Bryant houndstooth to me, but maybe that's the Crimson Tide fan in me. I can only see houndstooth where others are seeing keffiyeh, but
I say this with a lot of. I do not understand. I do not mean to disrespect the cultural and religious significance of the keffiyeh.
Sure,
but we should not wear a scarf that looks like a tallis.
Right.
That would be bad for the tallis. Is that an accepted thing?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think the keffiyeh is like a religious object per se.
Okay.
So I guess it's more equivalent to someone wearing a Sahal baseball hat, which certainly Jews do. especially if they're trying to show a certain political sport.
We've avoided for a long time Yasser Arafat jokes on this podcast. We've avoided, generally.
Have we? I feel like we've probably made a few.
Yeah, probably. But my dad always say that he is single-handedly responsible for the return of the Legionnaires hat into popular culture.
If you're gonna be like an autocratic, leader of some sort, you need to have a specific clothing look. Like that's that's
an iconic hat is real good, really good.
I mean, typically it's going to be something military related, especially if you're like a Colonel Gaddafi type.
I think speaking of Jews, we've got upcoming convert Javier Malay in Argentina, who I think is bringing the iconic toupee into.
He's the mutton chops man. But if you're a dictator and your vibe is just like, I wear a suit, it's like, no, you got to step it up. Like, I want Mandarin collar, a Mao jacket. Like, no, I'm just saying, like, there's things you can do to give yourself an iconic look. Anyways, I
like your Colonel Gaddafi and your General Perón and so on and so forth.
Right.
Standard military fatigues are really good. It'd be really wild to see like a U.S. president, Ike Eisenhower wore a suit every day, not like, his Marine suit, with the sword and the hat.
Sure. He didn't wear a dress uniform.
That. Yeah. Dress uniform. That's the word I'm looking
Anyways, to get us back on topic. So here's what happened. This woman, Kiana Lede, American singer. I'd never heard of her. I guess she did the MLB All-Star Game anthem last year. People were pointing out. So she didn't do anything at the All-Star Game aside from singing the American anthem in this Kafia-inspired sweatshirt. She did have some posts on social media previously that were pretty explicitly pro-Palestine, and she did write on a note one time, if you're a Zionist, feel free to stay your ass at home. Like, nothing like
for what?
Nothing like, explicitly.
What she was refering to? What
I don't know.
Particular event was she uninviting us from?
I don't know. I think it was just in general. So,
okay.
Anyways, all this to say, this has blown up a little bit. There are articles in some of the Toronto newspapers about this. I guess my feeling is like, it's not like, I wouldn't call it like complete nothing burger. Like, this is nothing and no one should care about this. I understand if you do care about this. I think it's fine to care about things, but I feel like this is just like, the NHL doesn't have someone always who vets who sings the national anthem in terms of like, let's make sure all of their social media posts are not going to arouse controversy. I'm going
to say this with no due respect to the artist, called the Rec Laws, but they seem to not have vetted if the people singing the Canadian anthem were actually good. So now I'm not sure that they're vetting, every social media post. Like, there's an old saying, I don't remember the name of the law. I think it's called Godwin's Law on the internet, where the way to get an answer to a question isn't to ask, but it's to post the wrong thing.
No, Godwin's Law is the one that eventually a comparison to Hitler is going to be.
Oh, well, that's relevant too. Cunningham's Law. Cunningham's Law is the one I'm thinking of.
I guess you proved it by saying the wrong thing and then having it be.
Yeah, we've gone meta here. That's exactly right. I think that's sort of what happened here, is that like. Well, I think people who are looking for this stuff are going to find it.
Yeah, and I think that in regards to the NHL, like the rule that applies here is Hanlon's razor of just like, let's not ascribe to malice what could more easily be ascribed to stupidity, and not even just stupidity of just like we don't actually care that much about who's singing the anthem at the NHL All-Star Game enough to like make sure that all their posts are above board, because like. Let's be honest, like the people who, it was in Toronto.
Involved in high levels.
I don't know precisely how the NHL All-Star Game gets underway, but like I would presume the owner of the team in the host city would have some say on what's going on, or people involved.
Possibly also the Jewish commissioner of the league.
Exactly. So
would be interested in such a thing.
And not even just from like a Jewish perspective, but just from like we are trying to be a 4-quadrant organization here. We would not like to offend anyone if we can. I mean, the NHL has gone further than some people would think is reasonable in the last year or so by like getting rid of Pride Nights or Pride Tape, at least. Sorry, not Pride Nights, but Pride Tape, right? That people thought that was pretty silly.
They stopped punishing people for breaking that rule.
Yeah, I just mean that they want to be. Every league would like to be an amorphous blob upon which you can put whatever positive feelings
stances,
you have.
Yeah,
exactly. And that, like, look at the way the NHL is having to deal with like these nuts conspiracy theorists who like think that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce is an op, and that like this is all like a Biden plot to get the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. And it's like,
my take on that, like, the op is so much simpler. The op is sell records and get people to watch football.
Yeah, it's pretty on the surface. I just mean that, like, if anyone comes away from this being like, I'm not watching hockey anymore because of this, like, you have lost the plot, sir. Like, you've made it. You've taken this too far. If you come away from this being like, wow, I guess the NHL shouldn't have done that. I wish they would take better care, or like not platform.
Pay more attention to who they hire.
Yeah, like, I guess I wish they didn't platform people whose views I disagree with. It's like, I guess that's fair, but like that's life. Like, that's going to happen sometimes. I don't know.
I also think maybe this is where I'm going to go a little bit further than you, I think, and say that the All-Star Game itself is a sideshow that is non-canon in the league. Austin Matthews does not get credit for the 3 goals he scored. Sure. Connor McDavid does not get any. The Edmonton Oilers do not get any points for him winning the skills competition. He gets some cash, but I think that, like, generally all-star festivities are a blip that doesn't actually reflect the product on the of the league itself. And thinking about whether or not someone's behavior at an exhibition game, whether it's the organization of the league or the players itself, has an effect on the actual politics or product of the league. Like, no, it is a sideshow that is meant to bring casual fans into the game.
So you're saying if she was singing at the Stanley Cup Finals, then that would be a problem. But
yeah, I actually do think that. I think if it was like an important thing, then it maybe if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was riding on the outcome of the game,
right?
There was the blue and white team against the red, black, and green team,
right?
And whoever won had to surrender. I don't know. Then it would be a little bit more serious. But I think it is, ironically brought more eyeballs to something that doesn't really have an effect on our everyday lives.
Sure.
And I said, with all due respect to Connor McDavid's skills competition win.
I do think this is a good example, though, if anything, of just like the microcosm that is sports, and just like anyone who feels like, keep your politics out of sports. It's like, all right, it's reasonable enough to feel, but like it's going to find its way in. And like, there's no two ways about it. Like, and people will use sports as a way to bounce ideas or interpret their worldview and outlook on life, no matter what. And that's always going to be the case. So, I think that's interesting. Anyways, I think that's our 2 cents on the matter. I really feel like it has had like a day and a half of oxygen, and that's been like more than enough.
Yeah.
and this is not like this is you mentioned earlier that it's like as our producer Michael used to say, should the Jews be mad about this? Like, is this what we need to care about?
Yeah.
And I feel like the answer is on this one. It's getting a no from us.
I'd also like to point out the irony of, she is wearing a garment supporting a country that she believes in, right or wrong, while singing the song about how great one country is compared to all of the other countries.
Sure.
Right, like the national anthem itself, I don't want to call it, I'm not saying it's problematic, but I'm saying it is a nationalistic thing.
Sure. Francis Scott Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner, as one of the greatest intellectual supporters of slavery throughout the 19th century. You want to talk about things that are wrong with the American national anthem? There's any number of things.
It's about the Civil War and the bad side.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not about the Civil War. It's about the War of 1812. But regardless, he
also the bad side.
Sure, from our at least that's what grade 9 history in our Canadian education system taught me. But regardless, anyways, it's a good point. It is ironic to be making a certain type of political argument while singing any national anthem, least of all the American one. And
exactly.
Least of all at a Toronto Maple Leaf hosted
in Canada
All-Star game. Anyways, people will use their platforms. That's life. Why don't we leave it there? Again, it's enough oxygen for this, and let's move on to our interview with Chelsey Goldberg.
Don't take half measures when it comes to home security. Alarms and cameras work, but they'll only tell you that your worst nightmare just came true. Safety Screen by Metalex for windows and doors will keep your family safe and sound with real stopping power. They can't be cut, pried, or bashed in, so you can enjoy carefree ventilation in the spring and fall with peace of mind. And protect your fixed windows and doors with Rock Glass, an absolutely unbreakable clear covering. Call 416-638-2539 or visit metalexsecurity.com to book your free consultation. That's METALEX security.com. Remember, prevention is always better than the cure.
So proud to be joined today by Chelsey Goldberg, professional women's hockey player. Chelsey, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Chelsey, can you tell our listeners where are we speaking to you from? Where are you right now?
I'm recording live from Sweden right now, but a little north of Stockholm, actually quite a bit north of Stockholm in Skellefteå. It's about a 45 to an hour flight and probably like 7-8 hour drive from Stockholm. So we're up north here.
And I take it, are you the only Jewish person in rural Sweden right now? Or at least that part of Sweden?
I think so. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but I believe just based off conversations I am. Yeah.
And as I understand, this is pretty far from where you started at. You grew up in Southern California, in fact, correct?
Correct. A little far. My travel out here was wild. It was like going on 48 hours of traveling, which was crazy just with the time change and everything. So yeah, a little far.
Wow.
A little different climate change too.
Right. I should say this is the first interview. I think we had to adjust the scheduling because you had just been signed to a contract in Sweden and had to get out there to play.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about growing up and getting into hockey. So I'm in Toronto. Everyone plays hockey if they like. It's not complicated to get into. I assume getting into hockey as a Southern Californian is more against the grain, or a little bit more takes a little bit more effort on your part. So what was your journey into hockey as a kid?
It's definitely a little different than Toronto, I must say. Do you play yourself, by the way?
I don't. I actually am the rare exception.
So you're the rare one. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I think if I'm 6'3", and I think if anyone realized how big I was going to get, maybe they would have forced my parents to put me into hockey at an early age. So.
No, it's all good. Yeah, in California, it's obviously not the most common sport. It's growing a lot, and it's really cool to see, especially from when I grew up playing, and then actually coming back to LA and seeing the growth firsthand has been so cool. But yeah, growing up, I actually had to play with the boys. I didn't have to, but just logistically and geographically, playing with the boys made the most sense where my parents lived and whatnot. So grew up playing started with roller hockey just for fun. Group of our guy friends. I have a twin brother, so naturally just very close with, our combined group of friends, and our group of guy friends got rollerblades. So we got rollerblades, started playing roller hockey, and then loved it, switched to ice. So then I started playing boys hockey with my twin and the boys, and then eventually got a concussion. Once I think I hit it was maybe Bantam AA, and ended up switching to girls at that point. And from there, I realized, earlier I realized that I had the potential and the motivation and the talent to take it to the next level. And so that's when college hockey and USA hockey and all the higher level competition came into mind after that.
Right. So I guess, so you went to Northeastern University in Boston to play at the collegiate level. I take it that's, if you want to play at a high level Division I, it's really like Midwest and Northeast basically. I'm sure there are California teams or there are Division I teams maybe in the what used to be called the Pac-12, but I'm not sure. I don't even know if that's the case, to be honest.
No, not at all. So I would say the majority of the Division I programs that catch people's attention are in the Midwest, and then Northeast. Boston area has a ton of schools, and so when I was visiting schools, actually I started in Minnesota. So Minnesota and Wisconsin, those are my two first schools that I visited. And then after that, I realized that I really wanted to be in Boston after playing a few tournaments and playing a lot of games there at the youth level. I actually went to high school in Vermont to compete at the highest level at that point in time, just to higher my chances of getting seen for college, because coming from California, the recruiting is very slim to none out there. So I had to make myself known on the East Coast if I wanted to play Division One, and obviously get a chance with the national team and whatnot.
Right. Take us through a little bit after university, how things went for you with professional hockey, because there's been a lot of sort of turmoil in professional women's hockey and things having difficulty. But, you were involved with the PWHPA after university. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that and what that was like.
Yeah, my journey was a little bit different than a lot of other athletes per se, and then specifically women's hockey players, I'm assuming. I ended up breaking both my legs, so I felt like my professional career started later, and that's when I was
Did you break your legs playing hockey?
Yeah. And so I was out for 4 years at one point, so I felt like I lost a lot of my college years, and so I felt like that me losing those years, I still had a lot of energy in my tank and I still wanted to be part of a team, and obviously I wasn't ready to be done playing. But breaking both your legs obviously is physically exhausted, but then you have a lot of
right.
mental adversity to overcome as well. So I actually thought after university that I would be done playing just because of my journey with breaking my legs, but I really missed it. Come to find out, I missed obviously the family that you get from being a part of a team and basically having a sisterhood built in. I missed competing and training for a purpose and a reason and whatnot. So it actually was kind of crazy how it all happened. But I was applying to get into the master's program at Northeastern, and then I got a call from the Boston professional team coach. At the time, it was the CWHL, so the Canadian Women's Hockey League at the time. And this coach happened to be the coach at University of New Hampshire. And so he was actually recruiting me before I signed to play Northeastern. So he knew who I was. I knew who he was. We had a good relationship. And he was like, I'd love to have you on my team. And ended up getting drafted into the CWHL to play for the Boston Blades. And so that was how my professional career started, was in the CWHL with the Boston Blades. And then fast forward, I'll just take you through the little journey of professional women's hockey here. So we ended up collectively folding as a league, and we all joined together to join the PWHPA. And for those listening, that's the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association. And so basically all 200 plus of us that were basically a part of the CWHL came together. And we knew that we deserved more and better. And so we actually were fighting for a sustainable league from the PWHPA.
Right.
And so
and this was sort of the first women's professional hockey union. And it was sort of the union first.
Correct. Yeah. It was,
idea, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why we called it an association, so we could come together and actually fight for what we deserved. And so I was very fortunate enough to be a part of that for the past few years, and play and continue to compete and play against the top players in the world, and I think that's an honor in itself. But at the same time, one of the reasons why I really wanted to be a part of it and continue to be a part of it was to actually be one of those members fighting for that foundation for the young girls to actually dream about playing professional hockey. So it's so cool looking back, knowing that I was a part of the starting blocks and the foundation of creating that professional league now. So now young players can now dream about playing professional women's hockey. I think that's so cool.
And it's really impressive to see what the PWHL has developed into this year. It's off to a really great start. We've seen that in Toronto, where we have a team, and we spoke a few weeks ago to Kelly Fratkin, who's playing in Boston. There's a lot of optimism. I think is really great. Just pivoting a little bit, I want to talk about your role specifically within Jewish sports and within Maccabiah, because the last Maccabiah back in 2022 was the first time that there was women's hockey as one of the activities. And what was your involvement in that, or how did that get underway?
Yeah, so it was actually another wild journey with that, and it was an 8-year project of mine that actually came to fruition what is like 2 years ago now. It's crazy to say almost 2 years ago now, but for the first games, so my twin brother actually got announced to play with the men in 2013, I believe. And I actually asked Maccabi USA if I could play with the men, and they said
to play with the men.
Yeah,
right.
And they said no. And so I was like, okay. And then like in the back of my mind, I really believed that there needed to be a women's division, like if that was the case. And so he also made the team again in 2017. I asked again if I could play with the men, and they said no. So within that timeline, I actually joined forces with the chairs of Hockey Maccabi USA, and made it a goal to get women's hockey to Maccabi and to Israel. And just long story short, after years, legitimately 8 years in the making of, I had a spreadsheet going for that long, and basically as I could think of players that I played against or with, I would add them to the list. And then I would ask if they knew any Jewish players that would want to play. And then it was just like a snowball effect of like, do you know anybody that would want to play in Israel for the Maccabi games? And if so, send them my way. And it was a ton of social media posts. And then eventually what happened was I actually played against a player in the Canadian Women's Hockey League named Melissa, and she replied to one of my stories, I think on Instagram, and was like, oh my gosh, no way. I've been wanting to do this, and I've been interested in doing this as well. And from there, I was like, let's join forces. You take the Canadian side, I'll continue with the US side. And then we learned that Team Israel had a team, and they had been practicing, and and then I took all that info back to Maccabi USA, and then we would hop on weekly, bi-weekly, monthly calls, even with just Maccabi overall, and get all forces together. And we learned that we needed 3 teams in order to field a division. And it was so exciting when we actually learned that we had enough interest from the Canadian side. The US side generated so much interest. And then we learned that Team Israel had a team. So it was just so cool to see it all come together. I mean, at the time of me wanting to play with the boys, I didn't really know if it was going to be possible. But whenever I set my mind to something, I find a way to make it happen. So I didn't know how long it would take, but it was one of those goals and visions that I had to continue to grow hockey as a whole, and then breaking that down even further, women's hockey. So it was just so...
That's great. I mean, I think we've really seen the development of hockey in Israel, including women's hockey as well. Just the idea that they're able to put a team together for Maccabiah purposes, and now for starting to be in international competitions, is amazing. It's a great story. It's one that we've heard from a few different people in different sports of like, we're trying to put a team of Jews together. I know one, and he knows one, or she knows one, and like we're gonna get everybody's names and contact information. Your last name is Goldberg, so maybe it's easy for someone to spot you. But I'm sure there were some people on the team who, no one realized they were Jewish until they needed to get in touch with them, or they revealed themselves or something like that. What was it? As a kid, I take it there were probably teams where you were the only Jewish kid on the team, and probably still now, as we made the joke at the beginning about being in Sweden. Has that been a barrier at all? Has that been something you've come up against, or has there been anti-Semitism? I assume it's I don't, maybe incorrectly, but I sort of assume it's not as bad in women's sports, which are more inclusive altogether than in men's sports. But I'd be interested to know if that's been something you've had to deal with at all.
I have been the only Jewish player on a lot of my teams, but I've also had other teammates along the way that maybe there's been 1 or 2 of us, maybe 3, 4, like at most. So yeah, it's always been, I would say 1 to maybe 3 or 4 of us at a time. And it's been interesting to say the least, but everybody's been very respectful, and I truthfully have gotten support from everyone along the way. And, my friends will make jokes here and there, but like I take it very lightheartedly, and just being like the only Jewish player sometimes, like that's just a something to talk about sometimes, but like for the most part, no anti-Semitism. I've experienced anti-Semitism for sure, but not like I would not say in the sporting world or athletic field at all.
Right. That's great. That's good to hear. I mean, I'm glad to hear that about sports. Certainly, it's been a common thing we've heard from lots of male athletes, but I do feel like women's sports tend to be more inclusive and understanding, or all sorts of things, right? But I want to mention as well that it is National Girls and Women in Sports Day coming up in a few days. I think when we're launching this podcast, so excited to be able to celebrate that. Is there something that is there anything that you think about in terms of continuing to have women involved in hockey, especially, or something specifically for Jewish girls and Jewish women to be involved in sports? Is there anything you think about or think needs to be done, or you'd like to see more of in the future?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind is just, the marketing and promoting women's sports as a whole. I think like
sure,
if you create a place to play, fans will show up. Like, and we've seen that now with the new league and the PWHL, record numbers, sellout crowds. So if you build it, like it'll happen and people will come. And I think just to continue moving forward as we are in this era where women's sports are continuing to grow, which is so exciting. I think it's just so important to continue that marketing and the promotion behind us, and just that we can play, and we can play just as much as anybody else can play. And I think that's a message that for me is really important across the board, not even on the female side, but even just like geographically too. I think I've been doing a lot of work abroad, whether it's in Israel. I went to Brazil to help grow the game out there, and now I'm in Sweden kind of getting a feel for what it's like out here. And to me, it's so important to continue to grow the game. So I think just even on a broad level, just being able to promote our talent and promote the idea that everybody can play and everybody deserves the chance to play, I think is super important. And that's something that I really strive to help with the game as a whole.
That's great. I think that's a great sentiment to leave things on. And I want to thank you again for joining me today. This has been a great interview. Thanks so much. And good luck with the rest of your season in Sweden.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Wow, what a fascinating interview. What an interesting life. Lot of nachas for Chelsey Goldberg on this side of the podcast, Mike.
Absolutely.
And thank you for quarterbacking that while I ran around my office trying to figure out how to get internet and audio correct.
No problem.
So much appreciated. Something we want to talk about before we go, while we're on the topic of hockey, history, and Judaism, as we normally are. Got a great email from a listener this week. And thank you to our producer, Michael, for sending this email along. We're talking about not the former Blue Jays, Tampa Bay Rays, and Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher, but our listener, David Price, has written into us with his collection of Jewish NHL hockey cards.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for doing that. He has cards going back all the way.
Some of these, I gotta say, are really kick-ass.
Yeah, he has cards all the way going back to Alex Levinsky, who's someone I was not aware of, but was a Toronto Maple Leaf in the early 1930s. He had about 12 years in the league, grew up in Toronto, Jewish guy. Unfortunately, this isn't a visual medium. It would be great to be able to share these. Maybe we can figure out something else in the future. But very cool to see these old hockey cards.
I'm looking at a Phil Stein hockey card. Phil is got a blue background with a yellow seal. I'm not going to go on. I wanted to follow up and ask, we're seeing a lot of these cool ones. One thing missing, he's got Josh Ho-Sang. He's got, a couple of multiracial Jews. We're missing a little Peter Ing.
Okay.
Would love to see Peter Ing in this list. I've been looking for a Peter Ing card myself. I know that, Jamie, you like a wager here or there. And he is an executive with the Casino Niagara Group. And former Chinese Jewish Leafs goalie, Peter Ing.
He also has cards, Bob Plager cards. Bob Plager, he's a convert. He's the only Jew to ever come from Kirkland Lake, Ontario.
That is the hometown of my friend Tom.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Great.
Bob Plager. How about that?
Yeah, converted Jews, married a Jewish woman when he played for someone who worked for the St. Louis Blues, I think.
You should, if Dave, if you're listening, you should pair that card with a Nate Thompson card.
Yeah, right. Converted Jews.
Converted NHL.
Anyways, thanks so much to David for reaching out. We love to hear from listeners. If you ever want to reach out. We had another listener reach out last week to ask us why we hadn't talked about Adam Fox as one of the members of the NHL All-Star Game. And the reason was because he didn't make the All-Star game this year.
This year was not Adam's year.
He has in years past, but hasn't been a season. But again, we love the feedback. We love hearing from you guys. Reach out to us on Twitter at Menschwarmers. We're usually killing time there, here and there, talking about Jewish sports stuff. So, feel free to get in touch. As always, we're brought to you by the Canadian Jewish News. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, who's going to be on siesta soon. But we look forward to more podcasts this spring. You can always find our podcast at the Canadian Jewish News website, the CJN.ca, and like and subscribe to our podcast in your podcast app, whatever you use on your phone.